It was August 22nd at about 7:30 in the evening when the convoy, consisting of a motorcycle outrider, 2 cars, a Crossley tender and an armoured car, were halted by a barricade on this road. The place, a well-chosen ambush site, is named Béal, the mouth of the flowers. It is on the road between Macroom and Bandon. So your vehicles would have stopped, General, on the far side of the road, but in roughly this position.
Roughly this position,
Yeah.
yes.
So yourself and Collins got out of your own car and took shelter on this side of the road.
Well, he and I got out, and some people got off the Crossley tender, and we lined up on a ditch, which is not here any longer because they've cleared this space.
Yes.
But it was a small ditch, it was like we've just passed along here.
Yeah. And this gave you a certain amount of shelter from the riflemen?
Yes, it gave you cover from the angle from which the firing was coming, which was up there.
Which is about, what, 100, 200, less than 200
Around
yards
200
away.
yards, I guess, yeah.
Would you have any idea how many men were firing on you at this stage?
Well, it was desultory fire, and from the volume that was there, I would say that there were only about a half a dozen at the most, firing rifles.
Did you feel at the beginning of the action that you were in a perilous situation?
Oh, yes. It was chosen ambush position is always perilous. And this was obviously a very bad position. There was no area for retreat. The only one thing that we could have done was drive on, which I said to the Commander-in-Chief. I said, drive like hell. But he elected to stop here and fight them, you see. So we did.
The first part of the convoy had gone around that little bend there.
There was a motorcyclist on in advance, a scout, and he was followed by the Crossley tender.
Right.
And then we came in our touring car, and behind us came the Rolls-Royce car.
Right. So that there would have been men virtually all along this bank.
Down, well, we were stretched out, you know. We weren't right piled on top of one another.
Some would have been down there, and you and Collins
Yes,
and some others
were
would have
down
been.
further. You see, it's a continuous bend. Where the spot where we were was one continuous bend of bank.
Yes.
And the various other members sheltered down there, and they were firing obliquely across, you see.
So there was a certain amount of fire coming on them. There was fire coming down on your
Definitely,
little party here, too. And you could see the men occasionally behind those bushes up there.
Well, we saw action and saw indications of rifle fire.
Yeah. How long did it go on altogether, the action before
Not very long. I would say 15 to 20 minutes maximum. Because there was a certain amount of movement with my people down here because the motorcyclists came back and said that the obstruction had been cleared. So that it was then possible for us to have driven on. But at the time I felt that there was a little fire coming from up there. You see that hill up there?
Yes. Which would have made things very...
Nobody seemed to have agreed with me, but I felt at the time there was.
Yeah. So that you were getting fire from your front,
this
was your main fire,
position,
and
yes.
possibly fire from that little place over there.
Well, very little from there, but definitely all from here.
Yeah. So Collins got up at some stage and walked along, did he?
Yes. After about 10 minutes of our engagement here, he got up, he saw movement, and he moved to the back of the armoured car. Used it as protection to have a better sight of what was happening on the hill above. And then he moved from there up around the bend, out of my vision. But he was firing from up there, and I was firing from here.
Was there any conversation going on between all of you who were here?
No.
Were you shouting things like, there they are, or anything like that?
No. There was nothing of that description whatever, except to get on with what we could and shoot.
So Collins was out of your sight, slightly round the bend?
Yes.
Under cover?
He was, well, under the same cover as I was, under the bank.
Right.
Yes, such as it was.
At what stage then did you learn that he'd been hit?
Well, I thought I heard a voice calling me. And I jumped up, and at that stage O'Connell had come up the road to me. And he said, where's the big fellow? So I said, he's round the corner, around the bend. And we both went up there, and he had been shot. He was lying there with a very gaping wound in the back of his head. So I called the armoured car back, and we lifted him and took him onto the side of the armoured car and moved behind the armoured car, with the armoured car between us and their firing positions. Got him to the position on the side of the road, And under protection of the armoured car, we bandaged the wound. I bandaged the wound, and O'Connell said an act of contrition to him. I knew he was dying, if not already dead. So we did the best we could to cover it up. All action at this stage had stopped because the firing had departed practically, except that while we were lifting the body onto the armoured car to move it, the motorcycle scout, Lieutenant Smith, had come forward to give us his help, and in doing so, an odd shot came and he was shot through the neck. It was a clean wound, and he carried on helping us.
What about Collins's wound? There's been some dispute possibly about this from time to time. You say it was a big wound, a bad wound.
It was a very large wound, open wound in the back of the head there, and it was difficult for me to get a first field age bandage to cover it, when I was binding it up. It was quite obviously to me, with the experience I had, it was a ricochet bullet. It could only have been a ricochet or a dum-dum.
There was no exit wound?
No exit wound, no.
Yeah.
Well, there was this one wound. There was no entrance wound other than this.
Just a great gaping hole?
Gaping hole, yes.
Yeah. Did he talk to you at any time after he'd been hit?
No.
You felt he was dying?
I felt he was either dying or dead at the time that I reached him.
You got him over to the far side of the road,
We got
as you
him to
say.
the far side of the road, and I dressed the wound, such as I was said, and Sean O'Connell said an act of contrition for him. We were both very upset, as you can well understand, emotionally. And the rest of the word had got around to the rest of our column, and we got them together and moved quietly down the road. And we moved Collins's body from the armoured car situation onto the touring car back, and I sat in and carried his weight on my shoulder in the car when we drove off back towards our home base of Cork.
Of Cork City?
Yes. It was a troublesome journey. We had encountered a lot of trouble and bother on the way because the roads were blocked, and we had at one stage to go through a farmyard and come out on the other side. It took us quite a long time because we didn't reach Cork City until 12 o'clock midnight.
And the action had stopped here?
Stopped here between 7 and 8, I don't know, around about 8 o'clock. Personally, I was holding the body of the Commander-in-Chief in my arms, and the rest of the cortege was moving ahead as best they could. And it was a sad, sad journey. When we arrived in the city of Cork, there was consternation at my headquarters. We had my doctor attached to my division was there, and he took charge of the body and brought it to the hospital. I thought it was to the, and I'm not quite sure which hospital it was now. I think it was the Mercy Hospital that he was taken, and the nuns there took care of him. I had to get in touch. I had to keep on running my unit. I had to get in touch with headquarters in Dublin, and this took a roundabout route because I had to send, we were working on shortwave radios, which were contrived for us by a fellow named Dowling, whose father was registrar of the Royal College of Science, Ireland. And he was very competent, and we had these shortwave radios all the way. And we contacted, I had to get in touch with Waterville. And the message went from Waterville by cable to New York, and back from New York to London, from London to Dublin. And that's how the message was received in Dublin.
That's how they learned in Dublin that Commander-in-Chief was dead. Your own officers, of course, in Cork City must have been appalled at the whole situation. What was their mood?
Their mood was very, very difficult for me to define because my own mood was very upset. I was not in a fit position to judge other people, really. I was completely grief-stricken. However, I got a call, of an emergency call from the female barracks or prison, that some of my officers were up there trying to force an entrance.
To get at the irregular prisoners?
I presume so. They were looking for some form of reprisal, I should think. So I went out there, and after arguing at gunpoint with some of my friends. I argued them into reason, and they dispersed and went back to their units, and a crisis was avoided.
The following day was Wednesday, the 23rd of August, and it was decided to take the body back to Dublin by...
We were ordered to take the body back by boat, which was the method of transport anyhow at that time. And in the afternoon, the evening, we proceeded down to the quays, and the remains were taken on board, mounted on the after deck, I think. And at evening tide, we started our sorrowful journey down the river. There were tears all over the place. I mean, everybody was grief-stricken, including even the members of the crew and the members of the guard that were doing honor to the chieftain. The boat proceeded very slowly down the River Lee, and when we were coming out into the harbour, I was surprised to notice that the British destroyer fleet was in line astern and dressed, their sailors dressed along. And we were greeted with a salute of trumpets, general salute. And this was fantastic over the waves, unbelievable. At any time, music is resounding over a big water space. And as we quietly went further on, they saluted, and then they sounded the last post. And I have that memory with me still. It always will be. It was something that is hard to describe. I was moved, and looking around the harbour, Queenstown Harbour, I noticed that all the windows all around had lights in them, candles or some light of some description, as a sort of a farewell tribute. It was a very emotional time.
The body, after embalming by Oliver St. John Gogarty, was laid in state in Dublin City Hall. Thousands paid their last respects. Funeral reminiscent of those which Dublin had witnessed for O'Connell, Parnell and Devoy, the remains were drawn on a gun carriage to Glasnevin Cemetery.
My love of Collins, I'd use no other word, hasn't altered one iota in the passage of time. He was a man whom I didn't know all that long, but whom I knew terribly well in a very short time. And whereas I don't think he showed me any special favors, he was always very kind to me and very understanding. And he replaced, or seemed to place, a lot of trust in me and in my judgment. And this is a most rewarding feeling from someone whom you admire so much.
A man of ability?
A man of immense ability, untiring energy, and thoughtfulness for others. At the end of a day, when most people would look for a rest, I've known him to go around looking for the relatives of people who have suffered a loss to try and give them some comfort. And this from a man who never had a free moment for himself. He was a patriot, a most courageous man, and a great, great gentleman.
After the funeral, as civil war continued sporadically, if viciously, Dalton returned to his command in Cork. It was at his headquarters here in the Imperial Hotel that he married his childhood sweetheart, and learned also that a new act had been passed enabling commanders in the field to hold courts-martial and imprison or execute captured Republicans. He was not happy.
I communicated with my chief of staff, and he granted me an interview, at which I explained to him that I didn't see eye to eye with this sort of thing, that I couldn't see. I said I had a prison in Cork with 1,800 prisoners in it, all got in possession of arms and so forth. Was I expected to court-martial these people and have them executed, or what? Words to that effect. And that was only part of it. He said no, that was not expected of me, but the situation had reached a stage where the government had decided to take strong action. They had already taken some strong action. And I said, well, how do I get out of this? I said, the only honorable course for me to do is to resign.
The war was still on, of course.
Oh, yes. The war was still on, but it was in safekeeping. And my resignation was accepted. Mulcahy said that he was understanding, he was friendly. He said that if I had occupied positions of importance like his, or similar situation, that I might not be so broad-minded. However, he said, there's still work for you to do. He said, I'm going to send you over to Mr. Cosgrave in government buildings and see. He said, we're forming the upper house of the Parliament, the Senate. And he said, I think that maybe Mr. Cosgrave would suggest to you that you become clerk to the Senate.
But here you were, a young man with a new bride.
Okay.
Your future surely as a soldier assured, high rank, and really you'd known very little else but soldiering most of your adult life. First of all in France, the Middle East, and then in Ireland.
Yes.
You were giving up an awful lot on a matter of principle.
Well, I have just made many decisions during my lifetime that have not benefited me, but I've been doing it on what I consider to be my principle. There are certain principles I will not violate, and this was one of them. I had no alternative.
Cosgrave offered you a job as clerk of the Senate, did he?
He explained to me, yes, that would be a position he thought I could occupy with some credit. He was a little surprised at my attitude about the army, but he felt that I had contributed something, so he felt that before all these, as he called them, the plum jobs were gone, I should get the Senate job.
And what sort of a chamber was the Senate in those days?
The Senate was a very august assembly. It was really designed as the upper house to give representation to the Southern Unionists in Ireland who wouldn't be elected in the ordinary course of events. And it was literally a House of Lords, of peers, landowners, and men of outstanding intellect. It was an interesting body. We operated in the museum, part of the building, and the chairman was Lord Glenavy, who had been very prominent in life as Sir James Gamble in the north, friend of Carson's. The deputy chairman was James Douglas, a very distinguished gentleman from Dublin who worked tirelessly to maintain this new body. We had the Dowager Duchess of Dessart. You had General Brian Mahan. You had Tommy Foran, who was one of our Labour representatives.
You had people like Gogarty, of course.
We had Oliver St. John Gogarty, and we'd got the poet as well, who sometimes looked up and more often looked down. And
Douglas Hyde.
Douglas Hyde was there. Oh, there were quite a number. It's very hard to recall just at this stage different people.
What was Yeats like as a senator, for instance?
He didn't intervene very much. He was a little ponderous. A very brilliant man, I'm sure. He didn't give much evidence of it in the Senate. But then the Senate was literally a powerless body. They had no power to restrict a money bill. And it was an interesting debating society. My leaving of the Senate was not literally my choice. I had the misfortune to have backed bills for relatives with the bank, and the bank was calling these in, and the wherewithal wasn't there to meet them. So the banks were determined to brush me off. I explained the situation to Lord Lenavy, and he and Mr. Cosgrove made some sort of an overture to the banks about sparing me, if you like, and that they would contribute towards the wiping off of the debt, which wasn't all that extensive. However, the banks were not reluctant. They remembered the fact that I had done something in Cork, I think. So that was that. So then I did what everybody else does that has to earn a living. I tried everything.
And everything included selling insurance, weighing scales, and whiskey. At the same time, he played scratch golf, first-class cricket, and became an international golf selector. A private life until war once again ended the whiskey brokerage and led him into the film business, which in time led him back to Ireland and public notice once again. He bought Ardmore to found an Irish film industry, to do what everyone said could and should be done.
Well, I had been making second feature pictures in England quite successfully, and had just finished with the company that was making the Robin Hood series for television. And having had some measure of success with these, I was anxious to engage the Abbey players. And with this object in view, I came here and interviewed the Abbey, Ernest Blythe, and some of the Ria Mooney and those, and got them interested in the idea. And I decided to make a picture called Professor Tim as my initial picture. And then we made this, of course, on location in Ireland and in a studio in London, outside London. It was successful, so we made a second one, Boyd's Shop, in the same way. Well, the reception that these got by people that viewed them was very enthusiastic. And as well as that, Professor Tim was viewed by an American film magnate who had just acquired the RKO studios. And he entered into discussions with me about setting up a production idea of providing him with 12 films over the period of a year. With his, he was prepared at this stage to go 50-50 in financing them, provided he had the choice of the star and the director and so forth. This idea appealed to me, but it necessitated acquiring a studio in Ireland in order to use the Abbey players, because you couldn't deny them the theatre merits by using them entirely for film work. And this was enacted, as you were aware. We had them making pictures here and working in the Abbey at night time when the occasion demanded.
So you set up Ardmore virtually to make Abbey theatre, to make films of Abbey theatre plays?
Absolutely, yes, that was the initial idea. I realized that in doing so we'd have to acquire a studio, but my ideas were not to build a studio for completed enormous pictures. This was out of range, in my mind. But it grew. associate, Louis Elliman in Dublin, was enthusiastic of the idea too. And we combined our ideas and resulted in acquiring Ardmore Studios.
Well, there was no studio here.
Well,
then. It was just a house. But you actually built the studios, did you not?
We did. We built them. We built the company first, and then we built the studio. Mm. But we were lucky to acquire this particular premises because it was literally a godsend. It had a transformer outside the gates practically, which was one of the prerequisites of building a studio anyhow. And we acquired the property at a very reasonable price. I'm ashamed to mention it now.
Do mention it.
Well, we acquired it for £5,000, which was 33 acres and a building on it in perfect shape.
But your investment, of course, in building the sound stages and buying the equipment was
Well, our builders were very competent builders and very expensive builders. And they built it, as you see, to stand the test of time.
What started to go wrong then? Why didn't Emmet Dalton Productions make money?
Because the completed pictures did not get releases. You can never make money as a film producer unless you're able to sell your pictures. And mine were pre-sold, but on the wrong basis. Because initially I intended to make second features, but the requirement was asked then for co-features, which is a different kettle of fish altogether.
With all your experiences in the film industry in Ireland in general, you must have some regrets about it.
Oh, I have many regrets. I regret the failure of my operations, particularly. And I regret the stalling of the industry at the time that it was through industrial action, which I think militated very much against the further advancement of the projects. This was a pity.
What advantages, apart from the fact that you could use the Abbey here, did you see for a film studio in Ireland? Because by and large, most people would say that a film studio in Ireland has not, under any ownership, been very successful.
Well, I haven't heard that point of view because there hasn't been any attempt at a studio until the one we made. I mean, a studio worthy of the name studio. And I don't think that the fate that befell ours need necessarily have been so. I think it was a combination of circumstances, some of which I've named, distribution mainly, that militated against it. We weren't just ready for it, maybe. Now we've got trained technicians, men with ability and knowledge that's been furthered both by film and television productions. So there's no reason on earth why it shouldn't prosper.
Do you consider yourself, in some ways, somebody who started the modern film industry in Ireland?
Well, it's true that that people say that you improve through watching the errors of others, and that may be we will have some success here now. I hope so.
With the winding up of his Ardmore operations, Emmet Dalton finally walked out of public notice and into retirement. Many years and a lifetime away from those events which had first put his name in the history books. He died on March the 4th, 1978, his 80th birthday, and was buried with full military honours from the army he helped to found a short distance from the grave of Michael Collins in Glasnevin Cemetery.